All right, first off, I'm going to introduce our presenter. Dan Garfield has an awesome demo planned for you today, so get excited. He's a full stack engineer, our VP of marketing, Kubernetes and all-around technology enthusiast, and he's our chief evangelist, if that's not enough on his plate. He does a little bit of everything, and he's an excellent presenter. So with that, I will pass it off to Dan. And we'll get him to share his screen here.
Thank you very much, Taryn. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Thank you everybody for joining. And I've got to say, this is a special day. Today is our last day in this office, which this means that you today are watching the very last webinar we'll film here. We'll film here. Part of that is because, as some of you may have seen in TechCrunch this morning, we actually just closed another round of funding. So we're going to be moving into a new office, which is very exciting. But all of that is certainly exciting, but it is not today's topic. So we're going to jump right in and talk about Canary. And I'm going to end this poll. As we talk, there is a Q&A button. So feel free to use that Q&A button to add questions as we go along. And we'll look at those probably near the end and answer those. And it looks like from what I'm seeing in the poll, just about everybody is in some process of adopting Kubernetes. Lots of people in production already, about 30% already in production, 30% in test environments, close to 30% planning on using it very soon, and then just a handful of people without any plans. Looks like 3 people total don't have any plans right now to use Kubernetes yet. All right, so let's jump in here, and I'll share my screen, and I've got the whiteboard so we can jump over and do some of that if we need to. All right, so as we get started here, we're going to talk just a little bit about kind of what Canary is. And can everybody see my screen okay? My chat has disappeared.
Yep, I can see it, Dan.
Okay, all right. As long as you've got it, then I assume everybody else does. Okay.
Yeah, I see. Right. They're saying yes in the chat box as well.
All right, so let's talk about Canary for a second. The idea of Canary is that you want to have a new version of your application that you're going to deploy, and you want to give it a percentage of traffic. If it works, we're going to give it 100%. And there are lots of different ways of approaching Canary. And there are lots of, I mean, it's not like there's some foundation that owns the term Canary. So sometimes I see it used in various different ways. But the Canary we're talking about today, this is kind of the criteria. So this is kind of what it looks like. You start with a prod version, a production version of your application that we're going to call Blue, the Blue version, the prod version. And all of your users, they're getting that Blue version. They're getting that Blue traffic. And the Canary is going to be the new version of our application. So we're going to deploy the Canary version here. It's in yellow. And once we've done that, we're going to start giving a portion of traffic to that Canary. Now, when I say a portion, it could be a percentage of the traffic. It could be a subset of users. I know a lot of companies will have their Canary version go to all of their employees. It could be a specific geo. It could be in one location. You can actually base that portion control off of just about anything you can think of. But we're going to give it a portion of traffic, that Canary version. And then we're going to monitor it. And if it's working, we're going to increase the traffic. So you can see the portion of users that are getting the Canary version is kind of going up here. The portion that's getting the prod version is going down. And if everything looks good, we're going to send all the traffic to the Canary version to complete it. Now, you can think of this is a little bit similar maybe to a rolling update, but the difference is that you have a lot more control over the portion of people that get the Canary version, and we have a health check as part of the process, whereas a normal rollout doesn't necessarily have that kind of health check associated with it. So that's maybe one difference. And if you guys have any questions about the difference between this and a regular rollout versus a blue-green versus a red-black or any of these other deployment strategies, feel free to ask, and we'll address that a little bit closer to the end. So that's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about a Canary version. And once we're done, our Canary version becomes the new prod version, right? It turns blue. And then we would move it over to the left. And if we want to introduce a new version, it would come up as the new Canary version, right? And so the whole idea here is that we want to build an assembly line, right? And this is how this whole process is engineered. And really, like, just take a step back and look at kind of Kubernetes and Helm and all of these tools. They're all really cool, and we're all really excited about them because you can do neat things. But at the end of the day, the whole goal is you want to be as productive as possible. You want to deliver software as fast and efficiently and as high a quality level as you can possibly do. And to do that, we basically need to treat software development and deployment like an assembly line. And so that's what we're doing here with Canary is we're rolling out these versions one by one, we're stacking them over each other, and that allows us to be incredibly efficient. So I'm gonna introduce maybe a couple of technologies here. Hopefully everybody's heard of them. One of them that we're gonna use is called Helm. And Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes. And the idea is that you can have basically, if you're deploying an application on top of Kubernetes, you might have a Go app, you might have a Postgres database or Redis, messaging queue, you might have a Node app, you might have a .NET app, and all of these things need to work together in order for your application to function. In order for your end users to actually get something that works, they need all of this stuff to run together. And so the idea here is that we want to package our Kubernetes application, and it can call in dependencies, and those dependencies can be managed by other teams, right? This is going to give us a lot of flexibility in our application. And one of the layers for this demo today that we're doing is to bring in Helm and use it as our package manager while marrying in Istio, which is going to handle our networking traffic. Now, if you're not familiar with Istio, I'll give an incredibly brief introduction, but the Istio is basically a networking layer that works. It's not exclusively on top of Kubernetes, but the primary target is Kubernetes, and it allows us to do a lot more powerful rollout strategies than you would be able to do with a vanilla Kubernetes, and I'll talk to that in just a second. So just and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on introducing Istio because I think you'll see the power of it here in a second. But basically what it does is you've got your services, and here you can see service A, there's a deployment, and then there are pods. And normally, if you just create a container and deploy it to Kubernetes, you normally have one container per pod. But what Istio does is it injects a container in front of your container called Envoy. And Envoy will handle networking at a much more advanced level. So for instance, it'll make it so that you have SSL by default for all the traffic inside of your application. And it also will allow us to do things like introduce security policy. And so you can say, nothing, you have to meet these criteria in order to talk to the other container in my pod. So Envoy basically acts like, you could almost think of it like a firewall or like a proxy that sits in front of your container, and it lives inside of the Kubernetes pod. And I'll show you that in a second, you'll be able to see it. So this is a very, very brief introduction to Istio. It basically provides this control plane, this networking control plane up above our application. So what kind of things can you canary, and at what level can you canary? Well, you can actually canary release at the pod level. So normally when you're using Kubernetes, what you do is, if you're doing a canary without Istio, for example, is you'll introduce new pods that have your canary version, and then Kubernetes will basically just load balance between the pods that you have. And however, if you have 4 pods and one of them is the canary version, then 25% of your traffic will get the canary version. And then if you want it to be like 10%, that means you have to have 10 total pods and one is the Canary version, and then it will load balance. And you can't say like, well, I only want, people from my team should always get the Canary version, or people that are logged in should only get the Canary version, or whatever. You can't do that kind of stuff with vanilla Kubernetes. You need something like Istio. So you can canary at the pod level. You can also canary at the service level. And so that means you have, a pod, a deployment, and then a service, and you can actually have that whole stack and then canary them against each other, right? You can also canary an entire Helm chart. So if you had your whole application stack basically deployed as a new release, as its own release, you could canary between those two whole versions that could have a whole bunch of different changes in them. And you can even canary at the cluster level. So you can have a canary, cluster that is getting a portion of the traffic, and you can actually then swap over and use that canary, or take the changes from your canary cluster and push them into your production cluster, whatever you want to do. So there are really a lot of kind of options for how you approach canary. But when sitting down and looking at this, one of the challenges that I wanted to address was, how do you marry this to Helm? And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges with Helm. And really, when I did that, this quote came to mind from, I should have put his name on the slide. He's a great writer. He writes, I just spaced his name. If anybody recognizes him, say it in the chat. But basically, when he was talking about the way that you film movies, he said there are a million ways to shoot a scene, but really there are maybe two, and one is wrong. And that's a bit how I feel about doing a canary release with Helm, Istio, and Kubernetes. There are really a million ways to do it. Ultimately, I think there's probably two, and one of them is wrong. So we're going to focus on the other one, the one that I think is the right way to do it. And hopefully you'll concur, and everyone will agree with that. And if not, we'll both learn something. And just to introduce kind of how a pipeline normally works, this is what we describe as a Kubernetes pipeline. This is what we do with Codefresh, which is basically we start with a commit. It could be to GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, whatever. And then we do some sort of multi-stage Docker build. We create a Helm chart, and we usually install that into a short-lived environment, a one-off environment that we can run integration, performance, and security tests on before we promote those images up and deploy to production. Now, this is basically all this stuff that would happen before Canary. And Canary is really going to be about this last leg. We still want to when we talk about application validation, we want to sort of shift left, which means we want to do all of our testing earlier. So we want to be able to do integration testing and performance testing as a non-blocking operation for our team, so that if I'm an engineer, I can get that feedback instantly on how my application is performing before I even do a pull request. But then when we actually go to release, we can add an extra layer of validation by sort of shifting right, which is having a canary release, which sort of tests our application as it's going out. And we'll actually do that today. I've created a pipeline that will do this, and I think you're going to like it. I'm really, really proud of this demo. So how do we marry in Helm? Well, one of the tricks with Helm to understand, if any of you are using Helm, you know that every time you update Helm, it does a new release of your package. And they basically look like this. Well, they don't look like this. This is how I'm representing them. You have kind of release 1, release 2, release 3. And between these different releases, you can have any number of changes. You can have different containers. You can have different networking. You can have different Kubernetes configuration. You can have different environmental variables, whatever it is. And Helm doesn't necessarily care all that much. But basically, it's packaging all of those changes into a release. And the nice thing is that then you can do a rollback, right? So you can go from release 1 to release 2. You don't like it. You do a rollback. That becomes release 3, right? So how do we bring in the canary here, and how do we do it with Helm properly? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start with what's sort of a regular production release, our blue version, right? Our prod version. Then we'll do a canary release where we do both versions simultaneously. And we're going to have some magic in here that's going to handle moving the networking up so that more people are getting that Canary version. And then we'll do a final release, which is release 3, which is basically just a regular production release. And I left the color yellow to show that that's the version we've introduced. However, to the next change, that's the prod version. That's the production version now that is sitting in that release 3, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Again, write questions as you have them. One thing that is tricky is that Helm and Istio don't talk to each other. So Istio actually, you can't manipulate it from kube control. You have to manipulate it using Istio control. And so it sort of exists a little bit outside of the current purview of Helm. And there have been a number of people who have kind of started working on marrying these things together. I think that we'll probably see Istio, we'll see Helm starting to be able to control Istio here in the next year. I would imagine. So far, not a ton of progress has been made to give sort of native Istio support into Helm. Now, Istio does have some support for managing templates as Helm templates, basically. However, that's still sort of in pre-release and not really ready for prime time. So what I've done here is I've married these things together by using Codefresh as the glue, and I actually think it works really, really well. Hopefully we'll be able to release this as sort of a built-in step here soon. But you'll be able to see how I've done it, and if you want to replicate it, we'll provide the instructions for how to do that. So here's how the Canary pipeline is going to work. We're going to do that commit. We're going to normally, I would do all that shift left stuff, all of those preview things. I've done that in a lot of webinars, and you're welcome to go back and look at previous webinars, and you can see how the shift left stuff works, how we do short-lived environments. But here we're going to skip all that. We're going to commit. We're going to build our Docker images. We're going to build our Helm chart. We're going to deploy the new version of our chart, and then we're going to do an Istio update to start increasing that traffic. And then we'll basically do a loop where we have a health check, and as long as that health check is working, it's gonna update the traffic and send even more, and then finally we'll complete the update. We are using a GKE cluster. That's a Google Kubernetes Engine cluster. Truthfully, here it doesn't matter what cluster you use because this would work with any Kubernetes cluster, and Codefresh supports Azure, AKS. We support EKS, Amazon's new managed Kubernetes offering. We produce, we support COPS on top of Amazon or any other provider. OpenShift, Rancher, IBM Cloud. I'm just naming all the ones I can think of. Basically, we support any Kubernetes cluster, so you'd be able to add that in. So let's get into the demo, and we'll explain some of these concepts a little bit deeper. Now, the application I'm using is one that I created. It's called ColorCoded. It's basically just a couple of Go apps, and it's very simple. And I'll show you what it looks like here. Hopefully where you can see my screen. I just zoomed out. This is what the app looks like. And this is what's currently serving is this blue version. And to help us visualize what's going on, I've created this dashboard. And what it does is it basically just requests our app a whole bunch of times. And you can see all of them are blue. And what this means is that we're getting only the blue version of our application. So right now we're starting from static. And here you can see the pods, okay? So here are the pods, and these are all, you can see the name here, they all have the same prefix because these are all my blue versions. So I basically have 3 replicas of my blue version here. And if I reload this, we'll still get the blue version. So I'm gonna go over to Codefresh, and what I'll do is I'll kick off a build. I'll change the color here, and we'll watch the rollout happen. Let's see, somebody was asking me if I could show full screen. There's kind of a lot of things that are gonna happen at once, and I wanted to have all these things sort of together, but maybe what I can do is just at least make some of this stuff larger so that it's easier to see. Let's see. Well, I guess the squares are pretty easy to see anyway. Okay, and I'll make this just a little bit larger. All right, so let's go ahead and make a change to this app, and then I'll go back and kind of dig into the pipeline, and I'm going to change the color to yellow. So let's go down here, and I can actually change it setting environmental variables, but I'm just going to change the default color here, and we'll write that. Canary version yellow is the new blue. And oh, well, it helps if you pass the right options. All right, I'll make this a little bit bigger too. Okay, now let's push that. And we're gonna see the build kickoff here. Now, one of the things that I have sort of built into this are health checks. And we'll talk about that in a second. Let's kind of let this rollout kick off. So here we go. This build is now pending, and it's going to basically clone my repo from GitHub and then start building the Docker image. This Docker image will build very fast. It is using a multi-stage Docker build, and it is we've really optimized how we build Docker images so we can build them faster than anybody. We cache all the layers. We cache the build volume. We have a built-in registry to make it easy. So it took us 22 seconds to build those. We're going to gather some information about what's currently in production in that step. And now it's going to kick off releasing our new version of our Helm app. And here you can see these new pods have kicked off. Oh, let's go slightly. There we go. You can see this is the new version here. It's already up and running. You can see the age is 11 seconds. And now it's updating the Istio configuration. Now, when you apply these Istio configurations, they tend to take about 30 seconds to start going, to really kick in and start shoveling traffic over. So it's a good time to take a drink. All right, so traffic mix is updated. Sometimes it takes a few seconds longer. Let's see. If we refresh this, we'll get some portion of our boxes will be yellow here. Give it another second. There we go. All right, so I've updated it. So now about 35% of the traffic is getting the yellow version. Now, if this were plain Jane Kubernetes, in order to do this, I would have to do it through controlling the number of pods that I have. But here I have the same number of pods in each, and I can just change the amount of traffic. Now, I mentioned that there's a health check here. And if I just let this run, it will complete, but let's interrupt it, right? So the health check that I have is it's watching for the number of restarts in a pod. And so I've configured it so that when I click on any application, it will start killing the Canary versions. So I'm gonna kill those. You can see them starting to error out up here. They're gonna restart. Kill, kill, kill. Look at that. All right, so we've killed all of our yellow pods now, and they've all had to restart. And if we refresh this now, we should be able to reach. Looks like they're up and running again. So we're going to be able to reach our yellow version. And we just updated the traffic mix to about 70% for Canary. So we'll see more of these showing up as yellow. Now, it's going to wait a minute for us to basically work with the application before it runs the next health check. That will kick off in about 30 seconds. So yeah, you can see about 70% of the traffic now is getting the Canary version, which we know is broken, right? We know it's broken because of the number of restarts on the pods. Now, when it comes to the health check, you can customize this to be anything that you want. You can look at total error rates of your application, which is probably the best. You can hook it into something like Logs.io, LogsDNA, or Splunk, and have it monitoring through there. Or you can really customize it and just look at traffic variance or whatever. Okay, there it goes. So it just said, hey, it didn't pass the health check. So we're going to remove the Canary from the network. And what it will do is it's going to leave it in a failed state. So it's actually going to leave it in that second, in that Helm release where all of these new pods are still alive. And I do this mainly so that we can debug it, so that it's easy to see what's going on. And if we refresh this, we're going to go back to the blue only version of the application. Looks like that Istio config still taking a second. It usually takes about 35 seconds for the Istio config to take effect. Meanwhile, the application, of course, is still running. There we go. Now it's rolled back, right? Now it's all back to the blue version. Now I can hear you at home. There's no microphones, but I can hear you just clapping and going crazy. At least that's what I imagine, because it's just a really cool thing to watch that happen in real time. And I'm seeing in the chat that it's true that, that people are clapping at home. Awesome. So, all right. So now we've basically got this in a state where we're halfway through a release, but it was broken. And I've left the pods running, so I can actually come in and, you know, I could SSH onto these pods. I could, you know, pull the logs. I could basically do whatever debugging I needed to do to figure out if it's time to do a new Canary release. And if we jump over, in Codefresh to look at Kubernetes, and we open up, let's look at our Helm releases. You can see my color-coded application. It was last updated 4 minutes ago. That's when we ran our commit in that pipeline. And we open it up, we'll see all the services that are currently running. We actually have the 2 different versions that are running right now. And you can see the images that are running. It shows that there are 2 images running. Does anybody remember why? I'm looking for hands raised. Anybody at home, if you raised your hand, thank you. I can't see it, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. That's awesome. Thank you very much for that. The reason we have 2 is because of Envoy. Envoy is running next to our image. So we actually have these 2 versions, 2 images that are running, and you can see one is going to be, well, these are all of the replica sets, all the pods here that are running, and one of them is going to be these Istio proxy. It's going to be associated with each of these. And that's everything in my deployment, right? Now, if I click on this image, it'll take me over, actually, let's look at the one that we, in quotes, is broken. That's this D1EBA4E one. And if we click on that, this will take me to an image report where I can see who worked on it. I can see that I'm the one that created this image by doing the git commit, and it doesn't have any annotations on it. And I'll talk about annotations in just a sec. I can actually look at the Docker layers here to see exactly what went into the image. I can see the logs that went into the release of and the creation of this thing. And I can actually jump straight to the commit SHA and see in GitHub what changed between these 2 versions. And here's my change that I made. I changed the color right to yellow. So this gives you a lot of control. Now this one doesn't have a lot of annotations, and I just wanted to show you an example of an image that has a lot of annotations. This is from a demo we did. I don't remember, Taryn, which webinar we did last that had this security report in it. It was whatever our last one was. But you can see this image has reports from Sauce Labs, from Testim, that has UI checks on it. It's got a security scan from Twistlock, a performance report from BlazeMeter. It has a JIRA ticket associated with it. It has unit test coverage. So these annotations are totally customizable, and you can add all of this extra information in. And again, it just comes straight from looking at our Helm release or even our Kubernetes dashboard and clicking on it and seeing what's going on. Now, let's look really quick at the history of this chart. You can see that my last production version was at 9:09 this morning. This was before the webinar started. And then at 10:27, we did our Canary release. And that's what's currently running because we're halfway through the process. And I can actually see exactly what changed between the, the diff between the different versions of the chart. And I could issue a rollback. Now, a note of caution. If I issue a rollback, right, I have both my versions of my application running right now. If I issue a rollback, what's going to happen? Helm and Istio don't talk, right? So Istio is going to continue to point at the old version, this blue version, which is fine. If I do a rollback to this version, it's fine. We'll see these pods will get deleted, and the Istio config will just continue to point at the correct version. But if I went back to a version before this blue version, like this 904 one, you can see this was a full Canary release here, just about 2 minutes apart, each of these releases. If I went back to the version before that, Istio doesn't know about it. And so it won't change it. So this is just one little edge that you can fix with a pipeline that will keep Istio and Helm in sync. And that's probably just a subject for another webinar another time. But we can just dig into this chart. We can see what's in it, and we can see the values that were passed. Now, if we have time, I'll go a little bit deeper into how we make Helm work with multiple copies of the same application, because there was a lot. That was actually a lot of fun. That was a fun part of it. And then we can see the rendered Kubernetes manifests that were actually applied when this thing was released. All right, so let's do a release and let it actually run. And I'm going to just change something in the README here to bump the version. Cool app to demo Istio, and we'll quit this. All right. All right. So this will kick off the pipeline. This time we won't interrupt it, and we'll let things go yellow. And we'll go back over to our builds. And once again, we'll see the build kick off almost instantly. And we'll let it run this time. So again, it will do the same thing that we did last time. We'll clone the repo, build the Docker image. This time, we'll just let it roll all the way out. One of the things I'll point out in this pipeline, so I'll just show you how this pipeline works instead of just watching it. I've got a couple of environmental variables that I set. These could have been imported from a shared configuration from my account if I had like some encrypted variables or something that I needed for the pipeline that I didn't have access to. I don't, so I'll just leave that. This one is set up to trigger just every time I do a commit. Okay, here we see the new version coming out, and we see the old version terminating, the one that we said was bad, and the new version is now up and running. It's going to start sending traffic here in a second. But I have these triggered just to run every time I make a change to this git commit. I can actually add triggers to run off of cron jobs or Docker registry changes. So if I push a new image, I can actually have that image push trigger a pipeline. And then on the Git, what's just maybe interesting to point out is that I can actually have any other repository, even if I had a different Git provider associated with my account, I can have any different repository actually trigger a build, and I can filter off of branches or modified files, which is really useful for monorepo. Anyway, all that stuff is sort of sideline. Let's look at this pipeline. Here it does the Docker image build. This is a built-in step. Now, for the Istio configuration, this was a little bit more custom just to gather the information to find out, and I'm going to make these into sort of regular steps that people can use in Codefresh. It just gathers and finds out which version is prod. By the way, we should have a partial release out now, the Canary running. Timed it right. Yep. Yeah, so it looks like we're in the 30% stage. And then it does a Helm deploy. Now we have a built-in version, a built-in step for deploying to Helm. It doesn't support using arrays yet, so we're going to add that in. And here you can see I'm passing an array set of values to Helm, which it's going to use to create the templates. And then to do the Canary, I have built a step here that basically just takes a couple of arguments. You need to tell it what's your production version, what's the Canary version, and what step change do you want to do to release this thing. I set it to 35%. If you set it, because it'll get to over 100, you could set it to 10%, you could set it to 5%. You can be as cautious as you like, and you can modify how long you want a Canary to run before you bump up the portion of traffic. And then it does the prod release, that final release. Again, not using our built-in Helm release step, which is very nice, but we'll show that. All right, so we're probably getting close to the 66%. Yeah, it looks like we're at the 66%, 60% release phase. I guess it's 70% because I said 35. So now it goes to 70%, and then it will go to 100%. And we'll see the old version of this will get removed once we get to that stage. Okay, so on this Helm package, I wanted to double click on that really quick and just show you what's going on in that Helm package to make it so that we can handle, oh man, look at all this junk. Get out of here. Go away. Get rid of this. This is confusing. Okay, so for this Helm template, what I've done is you can see in my values file, I have a deployment, which can be an array of values. It can actually be a set of values. So I can actually introduce not only a Canary version, I could have 5 different versions that I could launch at the same time. And I could, using Istio, I could actually do any mix of traffic to those. You know, future version of this demo, you might have multiple canaries running at the same time, which would work. It would be, it would very little modification needed to what I have today for that to work. And then one of the keys is that when you're using an array inside of a Helm chart, if I go and I look at my deployment or service YAMLs, what you'll see is that I range over that value. And these are Go templates. That's what Helm uses. And so this is using a Go template style of a range. And what I'll do is I will create a local context variable to keep my context, because as soon as you go into a range, everything becomes local to the context of the range you're going through. And so that I can still access my variables that are outside of my range. So this was a little tricky to figure out. I hadn't seen anybody else doing this before. And now that I've kind of had a chance to validate it with the Helm team and some experts that said this is absolutely the right way to do it. So we do this both for the deployment and the service YAML because we're actually deploying the full stack here. Oh, and it looks like our rollout is finished, so we're going to see all yellow versions here. I didn't check to see if the Istio config had been updated, but it looks like it was. There we go. So now we're all back to the yellow version. Now again, if I issue a rollback right now to my previous version, we'll be fine, right? Because I'll have both my Canary, my blue, and my yellow versions still alive. But if I go back a step before that, we need to. There's not a link between the Istio config and the Helm release. So we have to have a script that does that. We have to have a pipeline that will handle that. This rollout for the Canary, this is actually provided inside of the GitHub repo that I'll link to here. This color-coded application. It's in there under the Istio folder, and you can look at that script and how it works. My hope is to make it basically a built-in step for Codefresh so that you can use it. So that it's just kind of a one-click add into Codefresh rather than, I mean, today you can copy the repo and you can use it, and I'm sure we're gonna have people start doing that. But I think we can make it a little bit more of a built-in experience here soon. Yeah, you're welcome to. I mean, if you want to try it now. And Istio is still it's still a point release. They haven't reached version 1 yet. You're welcome to come in and play with our stuff and try it out. But in the meantime, that is Canary with Helm and Istio and Kubernetes and Codefresh and all of the Codefresh YAML, all of the scripts, all those things are shared in that Codefresh repo. You can find the Codefresh YAML that I used, as well as the Istio steps, and all of those elements are available there. So you can grab those out of the .codefresh folder, you could basically just import it into your account. And I'm going to try to make it maybe a little bit easier to just import into your account. But if you're anxious to try it, you can go try it out and let me know if you have any questions. So with that, thank you very much. That is Canary. So Taryn, how are we doing? You got some questions?
Yes. We do have a couple of questions. Thanks so much, Dan. And if you have any extra questions, please add them to the Q&A box now. It's just at the bottom of your screen right by the chat window. So the first one.
Sorry, wait, let me interrupt. Go to codefresh.io and create a free account. You get 120 builds a month for free, and you can try this stuff out. You can add a Kubernetes cluster. We have a deal where you can get $500 in GKE credits when you start using with Codefresh. So you can actually create your cluster on Google Cloud, connect it to Codefresh, start rocking and rolling, and you got everything you need to try this stuff out. So anyway, thank you. Taryn, yes, questions?
Sounds good. So our first question was if you could do a little bit more on Bluegreen deployments. And so I let him know, but I want to let everybody know that we do have a Bluegreen webinar coming up soon on July 13th, I believe, July 19th, excuse me. So if you check out codefresh.io/events, then you can register to come to our Bluegreen dedicated webinar. Do you have anything else to add to that, Dan?
Yeah, the Bluegreen is, I would say if you're just doing Bluegreen, there's not really any big advantage to using Istio. I wrote a blog post on this for doing it with Kubernetes. The whole value of Istio is that you can basically disconnect your Kubernetes kind of configuration from how the networking is going to work. And so you can say, oh, well, I want 10% of my traffic, even though there's the same number of pods, to get the new version. So I did a whole post on how to do this with just plain Jane Kubernetes that I would encourage you to watch, and we'll do a webinar on that next month. But yeah, do check out this blog post in the meantime. And really, the only thing that's different, if we still wanted to do Bluegreen with Istio, what we would basically do is set the percentage of traffic to be like 100, and it would do everything that we just did, except it would only do one release, do a health check. If everything looked good, then it would get rid of the old version of the application. So you don't have to do that, by the way. Get rid of the old version of the application. You could keep it around, so you could eliminate that final deploy, and then you basically have a hot swap available. It just depends on if you want to do that, if you want to keep pods running that aren't getting used. And if you've got like pod scaling turned on, probably not a big deal to keep it laying around. But yeah, hopefully that answers the Bluegreen question. What are the other questions we got?
Next question I have is about Istio, if it's a licensed product.
No, Istio is an open source project. Istio.io. It's backed by primarily by Google and IBM are the biggest contributors to it. But it's totally open source. You can just grab it off the shelf and use it, which was it's actually really bad news for a lot of startups that wanted to take on this problem and solve it. It's the classic problem of inventing something that is somebody else's open source project. But Istio is super cool. And like I said, it's still 0.8 release. Hopefully we'll get to 1.0 here soon. But there actually are companies that are using this that get tens of thousands of hits per hour that are able to use Istio, and it's working for them even in production. So there are some brave souls out there that are using it at that level. Yeah, good question.
And how about, I have another question, if there are any other ways to set up load balancing by percentage in Kubernetes between pods except for Istio?
Yes, so you can set up, basically what you do is just load balance, and then you just provide, you control the canary by the number of pods that you have deployed, because Kubernetes will just load balance between them, right? And so if you have 100 pods and you want to give 5% of traffic, you'll make 5 of those your canary version, and Kubernetes will just continue to load balance. Istio lets you say, look, I have 2 pods, but I want 10% to go to this one, and 90% to go to the other one. That's not something that you can do with plain Jane Kubernetes today. That's not possible. Cool. Good question. And then somebody asked, is Stackpoint.io a competitor to Codefresh? No, Stackpoint Cloud is actually a really good integration partner with us. So we're doing a webinar in a month, Taryn, together, where we're actually showing all this stuff sort of married together.
Yeah, let me look at our exact date for that one. I have it actually in September.
Oh, in September we're going to be doing one together. Yeah, they're a great partner of ours, and we do a lot of stuff together. Actually, if you go inside of Codefresh and you go to add a Kubernetes cluster, you'll see an option for Stackpoint Cloud. you can just start using. So yeah, good question. And then let's see. Oh, there was this question about, we have mostly single tenant apps. Canary doesn't apply to us that much. How about Bluegreen? Oh, I see. So when you say single tenant apps, you mean an application that is standalone, like a monolithic app? Because I would say even in that case that Canary would be really valuable to do. So I don't think it would actually change the equation really. Yeah, good question. And then let's see, are there any other questions in the chat, Taryn?
Yep, there were a couple other ones. Let's see. Asking if you could share the build script that we looked at before you looked at your Helm package template.
Oh, yeah, I wonder what you mean by the build script. So there was the build step that I showed inside of the Codefresh YAML. Let me go back and show you that again, and maybe you'll send another message that will clarify. But if I share my screen again, oh, this one. And let me zoom in just a little bit. So when we build this application, it's just a simple build step, and it just is typed as build, and we give it the name of our image and how we want it to be tagged. This tag, these are two built-in kind of Codefresh variables. One is Codefresh branch tag normalized, so it means it tags the image with the branch name, which is going to be master in this case, and then it also puts in the short revision, which is the commit SHA. I really like to do that because it means that I can look at anything that's running and I can see the commit SHA. And if I go over to my GitHub repo, I can actually tell that what's running. This is 616A6. So my current commit SHA will be 616 on my repo. Now that Dockerfile, it's a simple multi-stage Dockerfile. So basically it builds my Go application, and then it creates a totally Alpine image and then copies that in and sets the entry point, and that's it. So that's that's how that builds. I hope that was the question. Was there any other questions on that, or did they update the chat?
He said that was the question. That was exactly it there. And I also had a couple questions about sharing your GitHub repo again. And that was today was awesome, correct?
Yeah, today was awesome /color-coded. It's this one right here. And it will be linked to in the blog post afterwards. I think you'll get an email about it. And if you look under, oh, wait, I need to commit. I need to add my Codefresh folder that gives the examples of these pipelines. This will kick off a new build. We'll do a new Canary release for this. Oh, I should have changed the color to blue so we could reset it. Yeah, there's a folder in here that you'll see that's .codefresh, and it has an example of deploying a simple version of this, where we have just a blue and a yellow version, and then it does the Canary rollout using the same script. This is just basically, if you weren't using Helm, this is a good way to demo it. That shows just the normal kind of Helm, just the normal Kubernetes release steps. And then this is the pipeline that I actually used for today, where it uses the Helm release to do it. Yeah, good question. Let's see, any other questions?
One more thing, a couple people were interested in how you got two versions of the chart simultaneously. So I don't know if that's something that you can address now or maybe in the future.
Yeah, so it's only one version of the chart, but you can see what it does is it creates two copies of the deployment and service YAMLs. And it does it by ranging through the values. So if we look at my deployment YAML, here it goes through and ranges over the values in my deployment YAML, my Helm template. And when I pass the values, I actually pass an array of values. So for each array I pass, it will do an extra copy of the application. So if we look inside the Codefresh YAML, what it actually does is it passes in, where's my Helm release? Oh, here it is. So when it does the Helm release, what it does is it passes in these variables using an array. So you actually just set 0 for the first instance in the array, and then we'll bump this up to 1 here in a second to do the second track. So that's just the equivalent way of doing it when you do a Helm install. And you can, like I said, you can pass as many as you want. You could have 99 in there, and it would be, well, it would be very busy. It would be a very busy version of your application. Well, so with that, I think we're all out of time. And hopefully that was really useful for everybody. Like I said, Taryn mentioned, this will be posted on the website, and you'll be able to watch replays, share it with friends. They can watch the replay, and we'll have all the information on the blog post linking to the Git repo. I'm going to do a little bit of more work to just clean it up and make it kind of more standard, make it easier for you to just replicate what I've just done. But that is that's Canary with Helm and Istio and Kubernetes and of course Codefresh running the whole thing. So thanks to everybody that could join. And like I said, we just closed our round of funding. We're moving into the new offices. You're here at the last webinar in this office. When I come to you again, we'll be in our new fancy office, but still in downtown Mountain View. So thanks everybody again, and have a great day.